Hey, Tom, thanks for joining the Healthcare Digital Marketing Podcast. I'm super excited to have you on today. And I'm the host, Lamar with MedRank Interactive, and this is Tom with Dental CFO. Tom and I met, just to give you a brief story of Tom and I met in a dental networking group. This was probably, what, 2 years ago, a year ago, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And it's dissolved at this point, but I think for us, we stayed connected because we saw the value that our group provided to a lot of the dental practices that we found that we're both connected to. And Tom is probably one of the best human beings on this earth that I've ever met. And Tom and I, we just stay connected. And Tom, you're certified and you're a healthcare business consultant and a Kolbe certified consultant. And I think you've been in the dental space 20 plus years. So a lot of, immense knowledge and experience in that space. But yeah, I would just love for you to open up and kind of give some background knowledge and give the audience some details of who you are and your experiences.
Okay. Well, great. Well, it's great to be with you, Lamar. Actually, going on my 28th year of working with dentists. So that's good.
That's awesome.
My career started way many years ago. And I went to the Naval Academy, graduated, and took a commission in the Marine Corps and spent 7 years active duty there. And then stayed in the reserves, but then shifted to this role and have been learning ever since for 28 years. So it's been great.
So Tom, how did you yeah, thank you for your service, obviously, but how did you go from the Navy to dental?
Well, I've got to correct you. It's the Marine Corps, not the Navy.
Sorry, the Marine Corps. Yeah. I know it's Navy and Army. I get all confused.
It's really interesting. One thing that a lot of people don't know is I have an identical twin brother. He and I both went to Naval Academy, and he went Navy and I went Marine Corps, and he just retired after 34 years. So he's been around a long time. But yes, in the Marine Corps, I was a supply and logistics officer. So I did a lot of work with computer work and supply logistics planning. And I actually was a volunteer tax officer at the time. So I did a lot of Marines tax returns at the time. And just because it was just a hobby I enjoyed doing from college on. I had just wanted to learn to do it. So I got pretty good at it. And so anyway, then I transitioned to this role. A lot of it was on the job training, but I did a lot of tax work and did a lot of consulting, a lot of just on the job training. I go sit with an office manager sometimes and ask her a number of questions, and she would think I was testing her, but all I was doing was trying to figure out what she was doing.
Right. That's hilarious.
So I've learned a lot over the years.
That is awesome. So are there a lot of battles between you and your brother ever?
There are at times, but it's a good relationship.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so I know you work with a lot of startups and existing practices, multi-location dental practices, as I've gotten to know you over the years. But for a startup, what are some of the biggest challenges that a new dental practice will face that you're seeing?
I think probably the biggest challenge I see, Lamar, in these new practices, it could be a purchase practice, but a first-time dental practice owner, if you will, that comes from being an associate, is the fact that they don't understand that they change from being a clinician to being a business owner. Yeah. And it's a big jolt to them. In fact, it's interesting. We speak to dental students at Chapel Hill about every year. And one of the things I share with them is that their patients don't know one molar gap or any kind of dental work that's done on them from the guy down the street.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference in a crown. They don't know the quality of a crown, but they do know how they felt when they went in, were they treated well.
Right.
The lady at the front desk, was she nice to them? Was the hygienist easy going with them? And was the dentist nice? And so that's what I share with them is it's a matter of taking off their hat of their clinical side to be a business owner. And for some of them, they're buying practices that are generating $1 million a year. So now they become a CEO of $1 million company and they have no idea what it means to lead it. And so that's what I find the biggest challenge. And when we work with dentists, first-time dental business owners, that's where we spend a lot of time with them, is helping them change their mindset to that of a business owner instead of a clinician.
Right. Yeah. It's really cool that you said that, because I'm sure you've heard of this guy. His name is Michael Gerber. He wrote the book, why small businesses fail and
Yeah.
what to do about it, essentially.
Yeah.
And so he talks about that key concept of technician to manager to visionary.
Right.
And I'm sure you see this a lot with,
Oh, yeah.
new practice owners where they're really good at, the technician part, but then they have to go and hire people, which we'll talk, further about. And then they have to
Right.
manage those people. And then on top of that, they have to create the vision for the company as how it's going to
Yes.
grow and establish in the community and the overall
Right.
brand. So I'm sure you see that all the time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. In fact, we
Awesome.
even work with, one of the things we work with new dental practice owners on is, how do they have their first meeting? A lot of them don't even know what they're supposed to say at the first meeting, and they're scared to death. When they get their team together, what are they supposed to say?
Right.
So we work with them on that and give them some confidence and help them through that process. Yeah.
So, okay. So with Dental CFO, and I know we'll get to more of like what Dental CFO is, but so you guys do an immense amount of, I guess you provide an immense amount of value to these dentists, not just in one area. It's leadership development. It could be, hiring. There's all different facets that you're going to help them kind of grow and develop within the practice.
Right. That's correct.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then so like let's say this dentist is buying a new practice or purchasing a new practice. What are some key areas that they need to really focus on or understand when purchasing a practice for the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's probably the first thing they're going to see when they're buying a practice is they're going to get a pro forma of some type.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the practice transition broker that's providing that to them. So it's critical that they understand it, or they get somebody to help them understand it, because there are a lot of assumptions in that pro forma. There's because what typically happens is they'll take the selling practices numbers, and then they'll extrapolate and make some assumptions and adjustments. The adjustments are the critical thing you got to look at. Well, what kind of adjustment? For example, if they're not looking at it carefully, it could be that, their overhead expense rate is only 45%, which is pretty darn low for a general dentist. Normally it's about 65%. So if it's 45%, well, guess what? The selling dentist's wife was the office manager, and she didn't draw a salary.
Right.
So, so anyway, all these things could come into play, and it could really throw the numbers off. Another thing to look at, a big item to look at for a new dentist buying a practice is he or she going to be able to capitalize on that practice and add more value because of what they do. For example, if the old practice was referring out all the implants and endo and all that stuff, but the new dentist does a lot of that or wants to do a lot of that, they're going to be able to recapture that and build the value much greater than what it was.
Right.
But if they buy a really high performing practice that's really humming, and the new dentist doesn't do a lot of those things, I had to refer it out, they're going to lose money, because they're going to pay more than what they're going to be able to get out of it. So that you just have to, those kind of things you have to be really careful of. And then probably the last thing is you're looking at your personnel that you're bringing in, because what happens if, I'm kind of using nepotism as a theme here, but let's say the dentist has a niece at the front desk, been there for 15 years and is making $65,000 at the front desk. Well, that's a problem. Or I won't say it's a problem. It could be a challenge that this new dentist has to deal with. And so we help them look through those kind of things as well and say, okay, doc, well, this is an issue. How are we going to deal with it?
Right.
And, and moving forward. So
that's amazing, because from the marketing perspective, and I'm just looking at, from my lens of, as we're sending leads to a lot of these dentists, and you have Susie who's been there for, let's say 40 years, but she's not a salesperson. A lot of, the admins are not going to be salesy on the phone, which we don't ask them to be, but there's still a lot of value and education you have to provide to these leads, like as we're sending them to you, to convert them into patients. And so I could see where in your situation, there's some traditional thinking happening where you have to come in and shift that to help them grow. When it comes to hiring, though, like what are some of the biggest mistakes? I know, like, hiring the wife, or the aunt who's been there for many years. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see with a lot of these dentists in terms of hiring?
I think if I could boil it down to the biggest mistake would be the fact that they hire for skills only. In other words, they interview, okay, have you done this job before? You're a dental assistant we're hiring you for. Okay, have you done it before? Do you know the skills? Okay, great. When can you start?
Right.
And that's a big mistake, because there are a number of things in hiring the right person. As you mentioned before, I'm a Kolbe certified consultant.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we do through that is help the dentists understand who it is that they're hiring. And because it's, we call it in Kolbe 3 parts of the mind, where you've got a cognitive part. So the cognitive, how smart they are, and that's the skill set. So we do, even though they focus on that is important, you need to make sure that they are skilled to do it. Are they licensed? Is the hygienist licensed to do the work and those kind of things? So, and do they really get it? The second part is an affective, which is kind of a personality. Do they have the right personality? Do they have the right values? Do they have the right match culturally to the practice? You know, Zappos, the shoe company, they're real big on values. And one of their values is be a little crazy. And so they interview to make sure you're a little crazy. They're going to ask some questions. And so you have to understand as a dental practice owner, what are your values? What are what's your culture? And is this person going to be a good fit? Yeah. And then the third part of the mind is the cognitive part, which is what we measure in the Kolbe world with Kolbe assessments is, are they wired for that particular role? In other words, do they have the natural instincts for the type work they're going to be asked to do? And so it's helpful. We have what's called a right fit that allows them to determine whether it's a good fit for that. But I would say when dental practice owners, the new ones especially, they're hiring, and it's not just the new ones, some of the established dentists too still struggle with hiring correctly. And it's just learning to ask the right questions and to know the 3 different areas that you got to look at to make sure they're a good fit. So.
Right. That's awesome, because to your point of established dental practices still having issues with hiring, sometimes I'm in Facebook groups and I see, you know, the hygienists and all these different, you know, staff members asking, like, do anyone know of a specialist for this position? And it's because they're not doing what you're talking about, really creating a kind of a map of the right fit for a specific role. And I can imagine how effective that is, because you're going to connect, you're making sure that your practice is successful because you're connecting the right person with the passion to do that role, you know, at that level.
Right.
How many, I guess, like with the Kolbe test, like how does that process start? Like if a doctor comes to you and he's like, hey, I need to hire someone, like, is Kolbe the first thing you recommend, or do you go into the practice? Like, what does that process look like?
Well, that's a great question. If they're just calling us just to help in hiring, say, an office manager or whatnot, we do recommend that they do a Kolbe assessment. Once they've identified, we help them, first of all, identify what questions to ask. Okay. If they want our full service help on actually bringing in, we can help them advertise for that position. But part of that is also advertising the right way of knowing what you're asking for and attracting those people that are kind of fit your culture of what you're looking for. And that's kind of the first place. The second place, from a Kolbe, we would do a Kolbe A once they've kind of narrowed it down to a couple of the ones. And then we would work with the dental owner, the dentist, on a special index that we do that helps determine what are the roles, what are the strengths needed in that role. And then we give the Kolbe A and we do that right fit. So that's, and we also focus with the dentist too, helping them, making sure that they can identify what their culture is. They can identify what their value is, so they know what they're asking for.
Right. Exactly right. And out of curiosity with that, are there any assessments involved with, let's say there's 5-6 different candidates, right? Like how do they get down to that one candidate that's going to be the right fit, even when they all they're evenly matched, but maybe there's something that's a variable, like an assessment or a kind of a working play, like they come in and train behind somebody. Like, are there any of those things to help them pick, the right person?
Yeah, there are a couple ways, Lamar. One is a working interview, which is very common. And that helps you get an understanding. That's the skill set. Again, do they really have the good skills? And that's really important. Another piece is having some of the other team participate in the interview process.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
They get some instincts And what we would typically want to do is to spread out the questions amongst the team members, so they all ask questions that drive to what the answer you're looking for, if they're a good fit or not. But the Kolbe piece, yes, then we would do, then the Kolbe right fit will actually give you a grade from A to D. Is it a good fit or not?
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. And then, so you alluded to like marketing the right information when hiring somebody, but let's pivot from there and talk about marketing for a dental practice. Like, how important is marketing when it comes to helping these practice owners grow?
No, it's absolutely critical, Lamar. The marketing piece, especially if we do new starts, which we still do, and some, I mean, those are a little more challenging. And boy, the marketing is absolutely. I mean, if you don't do marketing, you're done. So you've got to market with those, and that's an interesting challenge itself. But even if you're buying a practice that's been pretty successful, you got to market, because you have to get the word out of who you are,
right,
and get that whole developed. So, and the reality is everybody's marketing at some point. And if you're not marketing, some competitor's marketing for your patients.
Yep.
So you've got to stay in front and hire the right professionals like you to be able to make sure that they're out in front of people, and that they're matching what is going on well with them. And one of the things we probably see the most, Lamar, is what some of the practices don't do a great job of is once they spent the money, is tracking it well.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, because then they don't know, well, how effective is their marketing?
Right.
Well, and you know, the marketing comes in two ways: internal marketing and external marketing.
Yep, you're exactly right, man. God, and those, it's just got my wheels turning just about what we do from a marketing standpoint. And I'll break this down in a few different ways. But to your point of working with startups, what we see a lot from a marketing perspective is that because they're a startup, they may not have a lot of money to invest in their marketing. So every dollar counts. And I understand that, and I'm sure we all understand that from a business perspective, because when you're starting out, you got to keep your expenses low.
Right.
Keep your net profits to be high, your expenses low, overhead low. And so what we strategize with new startups is really, maybe it's not SEO starting out, because like SEO is it's a very complex process, and there's so many strategies behind it. And the biggest caveat there is that it takes time to rank in Google. There's just no way around that. The only way we've seen fast results when it comes to SEO, when someone's searching a keyword and that dentist is ranking for that keyword, is when, so prime example, we had a dentist in Marshville. I don't even know how big Marshville is, but I know it's not very big. It literally is maybe 5 or 6 stoplights, you're through it. And there was a dentist we brought on. There was only 2 other dentists, general dentists in that area. And so the other 2 were not even doing marketing, for one. They just had historical value within Google because they've been around for so many years. And so literally, I've never seen this before. We always plan for the long term with SEO. This dentist ranked in Google in the 2nd position in 2 weeks.
No kidding.
Wow.
Kidding. Wow.
That's not something we could predict, but with Google, we always, back to the point of startups, it really just depends on the competition, if they have any historical value on a practice they may have purchased. But you can fine tune the marketing from an SEO standpoint. It could produce faster results, but typically it doesn't happen that way. So with startups, we're all about Facebook ads and Google ads. Facebook ads, you really just need to come up with an offer they can't find with any other general dentist or other dentists in your area that you can offer as a solution to their pain, but it attracts new patients, right? Like, if you do that and then stay in front of them through some of the marketing strategies, the SEO then becomes the long-term play. So that's with a startup, that's typically our strategy. But with existing practices, it's really fine-tuning their marketing, because to your point of tracking, a lot of dentists that we transition into our funnel, there's not a lot of tracking. Like, they don't even know what they're paying for. They don't know how many leads they've gotten. So we track it down from when that patient comes from Google and they land on the website, they book an appointment. We know if they're new or existing. We then track it at another level where we train their staff on, how to track if that appointment was booked, or we connect with their API for their patient management system like Dentrix to be able to, have that data to say, hey, here's the flow of traffic, here's the flow of patients, here's what you're paying us, here's a good ROI. So to your point, it's very helpful. But with existing practices, the branding in the community is key, because
Mm.
that's where you really you add the branding value on the front end. But then if you're branding yourself through sponsorships in the community, or you're partnering with certain groups where it's for a cause, like these are community aspects that's going to develop your brand, not just online but in the community. So
Mhm.
didn't want to go off on a tangent on that for
Yeah.
marketing, but just
Yeah.
just want to hit some of those points that you went through. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
So
along those same lines is, like we mentioned, if your team's not prepared to take that call that the
yeah,
marketing dollars created, then you're kind of throwing your money. You've got to make sure that your team knows how to receive that call.
yeah. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And that's probably one of the biggest, I think, challenges when it comes to marketing,
Mhm.
with a lot of these dentists, is that yes, you can get a ton of leads, but if you're not converting those leads,
Yeah.
you're losing. You're wasting money. You're not getting the return on what you're
Right.
investing in.
Right.
But I know we spoke a few. We've asked a few questions about dentists, but how do you work specifically in a dental practice?
Mhm. Well, we take it really depends on the needs. If we get a call from a dentist, the first thing we want to do is to spend time understanding, what are their challenges? What are their biggest challenges? Because um, the approach we may take may differ from one practice to the other, depending upon what their biggest needs are at the time. But we've got some really experienced professionals in our practice from a various different levels, from CPAs to uh, senior professionals in human resources, to certified healthcare consultants, to just staff accountants. We've got a lot of team members that have a lot of skill sets. And so what we do is look at the practice, and we provide a wide range from strategic planning. Some practices, we provide that. We'll go in and plan where they're going to go. Where do they want to go as a practice? Of course, we do accounting and tax work, very detailed tax planning, but we provide a CFO level service to them. So what we're trying to do is help a practice compete against the big corporate guys and provide them with the
Right.
tools to do that. Our whole role is really to simplify practice success for them. That's really what we're about.
Yeah.
We speak their language, we break it down, and we provide tools and dashboards and things like that so they know where they are, and they don't have to have a degree in accounting to understand where they're going. But also from a practice consulting side, we not only make sure they understand where their numbers are, but we want to help them improve their practices, improve their profitability. And once we help them in that direction, what invariably comes into play is their personnel side, because that's always an issue. How do we give a review to a staff member? We got a staff member giving us really a real hard time. What are we supposed to document if we got to let them go?
Right.
What are those kind of issues? A lot of headaches with that, and so we do a lot of work in that area, in the human resources side. We also, as we mentioned before, if a doc is buying a practice, we help with the whole evaluation process of looking at the numbers, making sure that they're comfortable and confident that the price they're being asked to pay is
Right.
legitimate and it's a good price, and they feel good about that. And then help them through that process of setting up their practice, what's the right structure for them, all of those type things. And then also with buy-ins and buyouts, if you want to bring in a partner. Some dentists like to work together as a partner. Some want to stay independent by themselves, but we can help through that transition and help with compensation formulas. How do you pay so-and-so? How do you work with the hygienist and pay them bonus structures and things like that? So just a wide range of things that we get involved with. And some practices we do a lot for, some practices we just do a small amount for, depending
Sure.
upon what their needs are.
Right. No, that's awesome. So it really sounds like what you guys do is like you really, because if you think about it, a lot of these dentists they're head down working, right? They're trying to keep up. They're trying to manage, but they're good at dentistry, right?
That's right.
They didn't go to school to run a business. So you come in and really help them see it in a different view, but then also take some of that load off their plate to help them manage their practice.
Right. Sure
That's
do.
all.
Mm-hmm.
So when you work with an existing, or let's say a new versus a startup, right? Or or we can just think about a successful practice, right?
Mhm.
Like what are like when you see the highly successful practices, what are they doing well to set themselves apart?
Yeah. The biggest thing that successful practices do is they plan. They
Yeah.
know where they're going to be. Because they spend a lot of time thinking through what is it they really want to accomplish as a practice. We talked before, and you throw these words out like values and, what's our mission and purpose. It's not a matter of getting together and come up with a fancy statement, putting it on the wall. It's
Right.
what do they really believe?
Right.
What is the why of their in existence? And if they can grab that well, then that's what attracts top quality people to their firm, to their practice, to be able to, and that's what makes a good practice are great people.
Right.
Chick-fil-A did a study. They spent millions of dollars trying to determine how do they hire the right people, because they're pretty good at it.
Oh
They
yeah.
hire really good people, right?
Yep.
So they did a study. They spent millions of dollars trying to determine what was their secret sauce. What is it that's making them do this? And I've got it on my board up here that I keep it right at my fingertips. There's 3 things that people are looking for, good quality people are looking for. They're looking for a better boss. So you got to be a better leader. I mean, they don't want to work for a jerk. No one wants it, especially the good ones.
Right.
They don't want to work for a jerk. The second is they want a brighter future. They want to know that they can grow. And the third thing is they want a bigger, a vision. They want a bigger vision.
Yeah.
So they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so if that practice has it, it's almost like a magic they have. They've got something. You've been in practices like that where, man, they just hum. And the reason they hum is because they have their why together. They understand they're all working in synchronous with each other like a symphony. And they attract the right people. They're motivated. And it doesn't happen by just being a good clinician. I can tell you, it takes a lot of work, but it all starts with planning. And what is it you want to be? And I kind of challenge new dentists that are looking to open their practice or start a practice, or their associate thinking through. I tell them to get a little notebook, start making a note of what you like about this practice. What do you really want? And your biggest desire, where would you want to be? And what do you want this practice to do for you? Right. If you want to work 3 days a week, great. But let's make it the greatest thing to get 3 days a week, So it really comes down to planning. It's not a matter of, there's no specific skills that they do one thing. It all comes down, if you're going to boil it down to what makes a great practice, it's the plan. Now
that sounds so simple, but I'm sure it's very complex to a lot of these dentists, right?
It is.
I guess for you, and that's great feedback, because I even think about that in my own business. How do you help them slow down? Because once they get in there, let's say you come into an existing practice, and maybe it's a dentist who bought into a practice and they haven't spoken with you for years, and you just come in and you're trying to help them shift things around. But they're humming. How do you help them slow down, and they still have this problem of not having the right people on their team? How do you help them slow down? And then is it like a monthly meeting, quarterly meeting, or, how do you engage with them at that level to help them essentially slow down to be able to create that foundation that you're talking through about, planning for their future? Yeah. What we typically do is they'll engage us for a strategic planning process, if you will. We facilitate that planning process. And it's not like we go off and spend a whole weekend at some resort and spend, all hours of the night brainstorm. We don't do that. It's about 2-3 hour sessions is really all it takes, but it's very focused and it's very concentrated. So it may be a Saturday, it may be a Friday, sometime when they're not open, and they can really give us energy. And then what we come out, the end result is a spreadsheet of an action plan that they actually take out what's required, when is it due, and who's responsible. And we put that out for about 3 to 5 years of where they're really wanting to go. And then they've got a plan to move forward. And who do they meet? And it may mean they don't have the right people. Yeah. And then we can walk them through that. And so part of that process ongoing then is we usually have, in this case, we have Zoom calls now every quarter. Right. And
and meet with them at least once a quarter. Some large practices we might do monthly, but typically it's once a quarter, because it allows us to not only review where they are, what are their metrics that are going, but what's going on with their personnel team. And in between those times, we'll communicate with them. They'll shoot an email or pick up a phone call that they've got an issue, and we help walk them through it. So really what we're really trying to do is really simplify their lives and help them really enjoy what they went into dentistry to do, but help them succeed. And have fun doing it.
That's awesome. And I think the key there is just yes, you guys are helping them create the plan, the strategy, but the fun, they're not having fun, doing what they do best, then the long-term success is not going to happen. So they're not enjoying the process. I was going to ask you this one question, but I think, you spoke, you provided a ton of value, and you spoke a lot into like how you guys really impact a dental practice, whether new or existing. But I'm sure you see online and all across your industry, there's tons of dental CFOs or dentist business consultants. What makes dental CFO different?
I think for us, it's the comprehensive list of things that we can do for the practice. We can grow with them. And so it's kind of a one call that we can help them in various areas without having them to go outside for this, a little bit of this, pick up this piece here and this piece there. Now, sometimes there's some specialists that we might tap into, but I'd say our big differentiation is the amount of services that we can provide for a practice.
Yeah, that's key. That's awesome. Because you're right. Like when it comes to, because I think about that too, from a marketing standpoint, we'll come into certain situations where they have, their hygienist posting on social media, and then they'll have, Susie in the back, helping with some of the content or community development, which they haven't done maybe in 2 years, or, Deborah's working on a blog post. So to your point, like they're trying to piecemeal it, but it's not effective because they don't have a centralized team to really focus, like geared towards that targeted focus. Right. And I think that's what you guys do a really good job at, is they can have, a comprehensive game plan with the services you provide to help them manage their practice successfully. So that's exciting, because I know I have a lot of dentists. I gotta get you in front of. So that was my final question for you, Tom. Are there any words of wisdom or advice? If there's a new dentist listening to this podcast, or an existing, if there's one thing that you would give them outside of maybe what you just said, or anything you want to reiterate, I'd love you to kind of open up to give that piece of advice, but then also tell the audience how they can reach you if they are interested in your services.
Sure. Well, I think the biggest thing is, as we talked about, they've got to understand why they are in business in the first place. Once they've identified the why, then it doesn't do them any good if they can't get the word out. So they got to have the marketing. If they don't have marketing, then they can't get the word out, and they can't serve others, whatever their why is. If it's to serve others, they got to do it through marketing. And so that's the biggest piece that they've got to understand to move forward. And to get in touch with us is just, they can go to www.thedentalcfo.com.
Perfect. And what we'll do, Tom, we'll include all that information in this podcast episode. And so again, guys, I'm Lamar with the Healthcare Digital Marketing Podcast. This is Tom Loeblein with the Dental CFO, and we appreciate you listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.